Nurses' Dark Secrets, Uncovering the Shadows of the Past. Prepare to journey into the shadows of nursing history where whispers of enigma and intrigue linger. As you peel back the layers of time, we uncover a realm of nurses whose stories are shrouded in mystery and uncertainty. These figures have left an indelible mark, their actions veiled in secrecy, their motives obscured by the passage of time. Our journey begins with Joly Jane, whose seemingly innocent demeanor hides dark secrets. Jane Toppan, also known as Joly Jane, was a nurse in the late 19th and early 20th century, as behind her caring facade lay a twisted mind. Jane Toppan was born as Honora Kelly on March 31, 1854 in Boston, Massachusetts, the daughter of Irish immigrants. Her mother died of tuberculosis when she was very young. Her father, Peter Kelly, was well known as an abusive alcoholic and insanity, which impelled him to stitch his own eyelids together. Only a few years after his wife's death, Kelly surrendered his two youngest children, 8-year-old Delia and 6-year-old Honora, to the Boston Female Asylum, an orphanage for indigent female children. Delia later became a prostitute, while Nellie, their older sister who continued to live with their father, was committed to an insane asylum. Less than 2 years after being abandoned, Honora was placed as a servant in the home of Mrs. Anne C. Toppan. Though never formally adopted, Honora took on the surname of their benefactors to distance herself from her former family and eventually became known as Jane Toppan. The girl excelled in school and seemed completely normal. There are stories about her having a fiancé around her 16th year of age who later jilted her, which caused her to attempt suicide and mental breakdown. On her 18th birthday, Mrs. Toppan gifted Jane $50 and encouraged her to find her way in the world. In 1885, Toppan began training to be a nurse at Cambridge Hospital. She was well-liked, bright, and friendly, evoking the nickname Joly Jane. But reality was, during her term of service, many articles were missed. Money, stationery, apron, uniform, etc. But her friends spoke so well of her and she was so clever that the suspicion went no further. During her residencies, Toppan used her patients as guinea pigs in experiments with morphine and atropine. She altered their prescribed dosage to see what it did to their nervous system. She was often to say that there was no use in keeping old people alive. Toppan was recommended for the prestigious Massachusetts General Hospital in 1889. There she claimed several more victims. Due to her questionable conduct, including dosing patients incorrectly and mishandling opiates, she was eventually discharged from both hospitals without ever graduating from their training programs. Toppan then began a career as a private nurse and flourished. Throughout the years, Jane appeared to kill for a variety of reasons, including opportunity, frustration, to clear a debt, employment, marriage prospects, and more. No one was safe from her desires. She killed a friend for a position at a theologist, her foster sister, her housekeeper, and her brother-in-law's sister in an attempt to become the mistress of the household, and other times just because she could. The demise of Jane's run as a serial killer started with the death of Mrs. Alden P. Davis, an old friend, on July 4, 1901. Mattie Davis died under Jane's care at Cambridge, and Toppan accompanied the body home to Cottonwood, Massachusetts for burial. Retained as a family nurse by patriarch Alden Davis, Jane finished off his married daughter, Annie Gordon, on July 29. The old man's death a few days later was blamed on a stroke, and his surviving daughter, Mary Gibbs, was pronounced dead on August 19. Mary's husband demanded an autopsy, and lethal doses of morphine were found in the 3 latest victims. But Jane was not finished yet. Before her arrest in New Hampshire on October 29, she fed a lethal tonic to her foster sister Edna Bannister, and she was working on another patient when police cut short her medical career. In custody, Topan confessed to 31 murders, naming her victims. But it is believed that her final tally falls somewhere between 70 and 100 victims. On June 23, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed for life in the Taunton Insane Hospital. Soon after the trial, the New York Journal printed what was purported to be Topan's confession to her lawyer that she had killed more than 31 people, and that she wanted the jury to find her insane so she could eventually have a chance at being released. Whether or not that was truly Topan's intention is unknown. She remained at Taunton for the rest of her life. Her motives remain unclear, and to this day, historians are left with only a speculation and theories. Moving on, we encounter the mysterious nurse Kristen Gilbert. Gilbert was born Kristen Heather Strickland in Fall River, Massachusetts, on November 13, 1967. Her father was an electronic executive, and her mother was a housewife and part-time teacher. From a young age, she had a habit of lying and a history of faking suicide attempts to manipulate people. However, she was a gifted student who earned high grades and was a member of her school's math club. Ultimately, she decided to pursue a career in healthcare after graduating from high school a year and a half early. Gilbert stayed close to home for college, attending Bridgewater State College to study nursing. While there, she began to experience psychiatric episodes in which she'd make violent threats against others and herself. After transferring to 2 different colleges, she graduated in 1988 with a nursing degree. Gilbert married and had 2 sons. At work, she initially had a reputation for being hardworking and dedicated to her patients' recovery and well-being. However, during her shifts, the number of deaths in her ward nearly tripled over the previous years. Other nurses passed it off and jokingly called her the angel of death. Under Gilbert's care, 3 patients experienced near-fatal heart failure and 4 patients died. This was combined with puzzling shortage of epinephrine, a drug that's commonly used to treat life-threatening allergic reactions or stimulates the heart. While many of the patients who died under Gilbert's watch were elderly and in poor health, numerous patients were young, medically stable, and had no risk or history of heart problems. Finally, in February of 1996, 3 nurses filed a formal inquiry regardless the suspicious circumstances. Gilbert became increasingly unpredictable and bought a gadget to disguise her voice and called in a bomb threat to the hospital. She was arrested and found guilty of calling in a false bomb threat to a federal institution, earning her a 15-month sentence in federal prison. During this time, the rate of death in her ward dropped back to the normal level. While Gilbert was in jail, some of her former patients' bodies were exhumed to further the investigation into the mysterious deaths. Toxicology reports show that all the bodies had epinephrine in their tissues, even though none of the patients have been prescribed the drug. We hospital staff members speculate that Gilbert may have been responsible for 350 or more deaths and more than 300 medical emergencies. One of the possible motivations was to impress his then-boyfriend, James Perrow, a newly hired security guard at the hospital who would be called to the intensive care unit every time a patient died. According to prosecutors, Gilbert would administer the epinephrine to induce a massive heart attack in her patients so that Perrow would be summoned to the ward. Once he was there, she had the opportunity to impress him with her nursing skills. While receiving psychiatric treatment during her incarceration for the bomb threat, she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Without effective treatment, this disorder can lead to violent and unpredictable behaviors, impulsiveness, and wild mood swings. In 1998, when Gilbert was just 30 years old, she was indicted for murdering 4 patients and attempt to murder 3 others by injecting them with epinephrine. Her trial began in November of 2000 and lasted 4 months. Pearl, who'd since ended his relationship with Gilbert, testifies against her in court by saying that she'd confessed to him while in prison that she had killed her patients. In 2001, Gilbert was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree murder, and 2 counts of attempted murder. For that, she was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 20 years. She'd filed a federal appeal in 2003, but because of a new Supreme Court ruling, losing the case could have resulted in her receiving the death penalty, so she dropped the appeal. Currently, she is serving her time at FMC Parksville in Texas.